Good morning. It's 10:30. Welcome to the last, but by no means the least, plenary session of this 70th Anniversary Academy meeting. We have a full session this morning and lots of wonderful things that I and I'm sure you are looking forward to hear. First and foremost, we will have the Kathleen Lyle Murray Award lectureship. So the Kathleen Lyle Murray Foundation was established in 1975 by the parents of Kathleen. Margaret Murray and Clark O'Murray lived in Kansas City and established this foundation after Kathleen died at the age of 12 in 1962. Mrs. Murray was very active in Kansas City in the United Cerebral Palsy Association, and she became national president of UCP in the 1970s. She was also a member of the National Advisory Council on Developmental Disabilities in Washington, D.C. She was a tireless organizer and administrator for the rights and education of the handicapped until her passing in 2001, when the torch was passed on to her son, Brian, who's upheld the position of administrator of the foundation, carrying on his family's desire and dedication on behalf of the developmentally disabled. And we're very grateful to the foundation to sponsor this award every year. This year's recipient is Professor Tom Chau. Tom Chau is the Vice President of Research at Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital, where I have the privilege of working. He's a professor at the University of Toronto. His phenomenal body of work and his research has enabled and continues to enable access to communication in children and youth with severe physical impairments. He holds the Raymond G. Chang Foundation Chair in Access Innovations and has published over 175 refereed articles. Welcome, Tom Chau, and congratulations on this well-deserved award.
Thank you, Uni, for those very kind words of introduction. So the title of my presentation today is Listen to Me, I Have Something to Say, which happens to be our attention grabber on many of the devices that we work on. Oops. Where do I point? Oh, there we go. So just disclosures, my lab has received funding from Nestle Health Science and continues to do so, and has also received some funding from some of these other companies, but none of their support relates to the work I'm going to share with you today. This clicker doesn't seem to be working. Advanced slide, please. Yeah. So I just wanted to thank the Academy for this incredible honor. Especially given the distinguished investigators and clinicians that have been honored in the last couple of days. I feel really humbled to be among that list. And thank you to the Kathleen Lyle Murray Foundation and family for your pioneering work in advocacy in the area of childhood disability. Next slide, please. Also want to shout out to the army of graduate students, research students, and postdoctoral fellows who have contributed to the work that I'm going to share today. What I'm going to tell you about are really their ideas. I can't take credit for any of this work. They've just been very gracious to let me go along for the ride. And of course, I need to acknowledge the many families and children who have inspired all of this work and continue to be so accommodating of us clumsy researchers. Next slide, please. So the issue I want to talk to you today about is the right to communication. One of the mothers of a child at our hospital describes it as a crime to keep her son locked in the jail of a non-functioning body. And indeed, there's some verity to her lament here. Next slide, please. In the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, it's mentioned at least 3 times in 3 different articles that communication is a fundamental human right. And here in the United States, in the Americans with Disabilities Act, numerous times the need for provision of effective communication is mentioned in that act. So next slide, please. So what is the consequence of not having communication?
I tried to play this with Dickson. And stuff. I tried to play this with stuff. To make me happy and get distracted. Loneliness.
So I wasn't able to give you the context for this. So this is a little boy, obviously with cerebral palsy, and he was asked why he indulges himself on the computer at school. And this was his response. It makes him happy and helps him to get distracted from the loneliness. And further on in his interview, he describes how it's very difficult for him to make friends at school. So it absolutely broke my heart when I heard this interview, because we've worked with Julian here since he was in junior kindergarten, and I felt he was one of the kids who was really set up for success, and to hear him say this as a high school student really broke my heart. So you may ask yourselves, it's 2016, why don't we have access solutions, access to communication for children of all abilities? Well, the reality is it's an incredible challenge. On the one hand here, you have children like Corvin, who has athetoid CP. He's constantly moving. Any mechanical solution, any mechanical switch is bound to fail. There's going to be inadvertent, involuntary activations. It's very quickly going to become a very frustrating experience. On the other hand, you have someone like Max, GMFCS level 5 CP, very little movement, very little motor control, in fact, inconsistent contingency awareness. And then you have everything in between. So a real diversity, a lot of variation, a very challenging problem. So I want to tell you today about some of the possibilities, some of the work that we've done at home, Bloorview. And in preparing for this talk, I organized my thoughts under a couple of key themes. So I'll share those words with you. And these words, I think, depict the learnings that we have amassed over the years collectively as a lab from the children and families and from our research students. So the first word I want to share is the word dreams. So very early on in our research, when we had some media coverage, we were criticized. We were criticized for raising expectations but being unable to deliver, unable to provide families and children with affordable and viable devices. And that made us feel really guilty. But then we were flooded with messages from families who thanked us for instilling hope, knowing that our research may not be in time to benefit their child, but thank you for instilling hope in that there were other ways that people could communicate. And Dr. Jonas Salk of the polio vaccine fame once said that hope lies in dreams, imagination, and the courage of those who dare turn them into reality. So dreams are extremely powerful. And I think the story of Jacob, which I'm going to share with you next, really exemplifies the power of dreams. And on this next slide, you're going to hear about the dreams of Jacob's mom, Marcy.
If I can choose one thing for my son, if I would want him to walk or to speak or to eat, what would I choose? And I think without a doubt, I would say, I want him to be able to communicate. Without the communication, there's so much that's closed to him. So by giving him the ability to communicate, we're giving him the ability to have a say in what goes on with him and around him.
So Marcy's dream is incredibly strong, and it has propelled this family along for so many years. Jake has a Pelizaeus-Merzbacher disease, a genetic condition that leaves him incredibly weak. He doesn't have much motor control at all, and he also has cortical vision impairment. And so our team had the good fortune of working with Jake when he was 6 years old. And what the team developed was a device that was based on the iPod that was similar to an auditory scanning system. So it presented messages to Jake, and we harnessed the very little cheek movement that he had to select phrases or word fragments to compose sentences. And I still remember the very first time we had Jake try the system. Sitting in the room, he navigated through the menu and he composed the message, "I want a great big hug." And we everyone in the room kind of looked at each other. We said, well, he probably just lucked out because there's no way he understood that. And then he went through the system again, and he composed exactly the same message. I want a great big hug. So now the probability of this happening by random was reduced. And to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that he knew exactly what he was doing, he went on and composed the same message a third time. I want a great big hug. His mom gave him a hug. In this next video, you'll see Jake communicating with his OT at school.
Please listen to me. Something to say. I won. Never mind. Big hug. I want a great big hug.
Jacob, did you want a great big hug? You do? Okay, here it comes, Jacob. Here it comes, here it comes. Big bear hug, bear hug.
Please listen to me.
So in that video, he goes on to say, this is fun, let's do it some more. So unfortunately, Jake's condition is degenerative, and he's now lost the function of his cheek. And in fact, he's not able to tolerate the seated position you saw him in this video. And he turned 13 last year, and the family is of Jewish faith. And his mother's dream was to have Jake participate actively in his bar mitzvah. She didn't want him to be a passive observer. And so the team worked tirelessly to find a different way for Jake to communicate. And the team found that he could still blink. And using an EEG system that typically is for measuring brain signals, but was sensitive to myogenic artifacts, the team was able to harness his blinking. And so Jacob was able to recite the prayers at his own bar mitzvah. And this took place last year at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto. And in this picture, Jake is being hoisted after the ceremony, wheelchair and all, in celebration. And his mom has written a book called The Boy Who Can, which is a raw and compelling account of his first 10 years with this very debilitating condition. So the power of dreams, that was one very important lesson for our team. The next word I want to share with you is the word precious. Dr. Viktor Frankl, who's a Holocaust survivor, said that individuals are precious, unique, and irreplaceable. And I think the story that illustrates this precious quality of the individual is the story of Don. So Don enrolled in our research when he was in his early 20s. A young man with a cerebral palsy, GMFCS level 5, his severe scoliosis, and is a very awkward position in his wheelchair. His neck laterally flexed to one side. He had a lot of pain in his arms and in his back. And he had tried many different communication devices in the past, access pathways, and nothing really panned out. He came to us, and his one wish was, as expressed by his mom, was to be able to do his electronic reading. Now, nobody really knew whether Don could read or not, because he'd never been tested in school. He couldn't. And so my brilliant PhD student at the time, Nagar, came up with the idea of using thermal imaging, because we noticed very early on that Don could open and close his mouth. And it turns out when you use thermal imaging, the background is isothermal, so it's very easy to segment out his head. And she developed some elegant algorithms to pick out his mouth and detect the hot spot. So the intraoral cavity is a little bit warmer than the surrounding skin, and allow Don to control something on the computer. So then we launched into a period of training.
Good try.
So Don here is shooting down airplanes by opening his mouth, because you have to keep in mind he's never used this posture, this mouth posture, for anything functional. So training him to open and close his mouth on time. So after months of training, he was ready to proceed to the next stage, and we put him in front of an on-screen keyboard, and he would be selecting letters by opening his mouth. And what he typed was M-U-T-H, and we got really excited. He's typing mouth because he's controlling the computer with his mouth. But he wasn't finished. He went on to type E-R, mother. This was his first word at age 25. His mother waited a quarter century for her son to call out to him.
Mother.
So this was a precious moment for my PhD student who was in a room for his mother. It was a tearful moment. And fortunately, Don's story was written up by our national newspaper in Canada, and Don received a donation from IBM of a thermal camera And so now he's at home, able to do his own electronic reading, flip pages, access the internet, type emails. Jumping ahead, the next word I want to share with you is the word of mission. And just remember who it was. John Vanier, the founder of the L'Arche communities, which are homes for people, adults with developmental disabilities. He said that to have a sense of purpose in life, you need to feel needed by at least one person. And I want to tell you the story of Eric. Now, Eric, I had the good fortune of supervising his master's degree. Eric had a C1, C2 spinal cord injury as an adolescent, subsequent to a bout of transverse myelitis. So he went from being a typically developing young person to being completely paralyzed and mechanically ventilated. He went through a period of depression, but mustered the strength to come back and finish high school. And then he enrolled in engineering at university. It took him 10 years to finish his engineering degree because of his very frail health. He was frequently hospitalized for bladder infections, aspiration pneumonia. And then he enrolled in the master's program and finished his master's. But Eric found purpose in his life, as you'll see in this next video.
Eric has been paralyzed from the neck down for 12 years, but as one of the brains behind this musical device, he has become a mentor and a leading software developer here.
So Eric became a role model for other children with disability, and in fact, he was a key contributor to what we call the virtual music instrument at Holland Bloorview, which is an instrument that allows children to play music with any part of their body. It could be as small as an eye blink to a wave of a hand. And talk about mission and purpose. Eric actually performed on stage with the Montreal Symphony Orchestra in 2011, playing the virtual violin, this technology that he helped to create. And the next video is a short promotional clip that was made before the concert.
Let's try the first two variations.
Which one would you like to keep, the quarter notes?
Let's keep the quarter notes.
Okay, so that was...
Is that okay, Eric? I think we're covering you right now. We can't hear any of the counterpoint, so why don't we start from there first? When I see someone like Eric producing music and we can react off of that into something completely new in a new territory, well, it makes it fresh again.
For me as an artist, it was fascinating to see how technology was married into the aesthetic and music making experience.
Yep, we're all playing.
The ability to create music with just the wave of a hand with small gestures or moving your head, it was something very powerful.
I've learned playing with the violin for about 8 years before I got paralyzed. Ever since I got paralyzed, I really didn't think that I was able to play an instrument again. I've never done it in the settings like this before, not mentioning being on the stage. It's an incredible feeling. It's not something that I thought I would be able to do before the VMI was invented. It's pretty good.
So you may have noticed Eric was actually playing the violin part with the very slight movements of his head, and he actually had to synchronize his movements so that it would be in time with the music that was being played by the other musicians. So the next word I want to share with you is that of childlike. And John Howard Griffin, the author of Black Like Me, he's a late Texan author. He wrote about second innocence in many of his writings, and for the longest time I never understood what this term meant until I had the opportunity to work with so many children and families with disability. And I realized he was referring to the unbiased quality that children have, how they come to a setting unassuming, without prejudice. They're quick to forgive, they're curious, they're authentic. All those qualities that sometimes become obscured as we become adults and are busy with the hustle bustle of everyday life. And so John Howard Griffin describes our journey through adulthood as a search for our second innocence, to return to our childlike qualities. And the story of Maria I think represents and reminds me certainly of what it means to be childlike. Maria is a 10-year-old girl. She is happy, very jovial, likes to joke around, and she is a Hummer user. So she's nonverbal, but she's able to vibrate her vocal folds. So at Holland Bloorville, we have created a technology that harnesses vocal fold vibrations, and we're able to detect the vibrations specifically associated with humming, which are very different from the vibrations that occur when you swallow, or when you turn your head, or when you cough. And in the next video, you'll see Maria communicating with the Hummer.
I enjoy using this Hummer. I love that everybody understands. Very helpful and helps me to write my stories.
She can speak sentences in Russian, English. Some people, they don't believe when I tell them that she speaks sentences and I can understand. But then she was able to write it down and make computer to read it. It was clear to everyone, so it was exciting. Yes. Yes.
I want to play with my dad. We will go outside. After that, we will go to the bed.
And just to give you a sense of Maria's playfulness, during this interview, she typed on her computer, and you saw some of the text there. She said, "My baby wolf," which is her little stuffy toy, "needs to go to Tim Hortons," which is the coffee chain in Canada. So she wanted to get out of the interview, but she didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, so it was the baby wolf that wanted to go. So childlike. My second last word, affirming. And very early on, I realized that affirmation was so important, particularly to children with disabilities who don't have a voice, because many of the interactions, many of their daily experiences are in fact so infirming. It emphasizes what they can't do, their impairments, and people misunderstanding them, people not waiting patiently for them to try to communicate. So Louise Hayes writes a book, I Think I Am, to teach children about affirmative thinking. And this next story about a young boy, a 5-year-old boy called Dean, I think illustrates this concept of affirmation. So we start working with Dean when he was 5. He doesn't have a diagnosis, but he has almost no motor control, and he's not able to speak. It turns out Dean is also able to vibrate his vocal folds, and so he's another Hummer user. And his goal, when he enrolled in the research, was to be able to call his dad at work. So he went through months of training, and when he finally got to the point of being functional with an on-screen keyboard, his mother picked up the phone and called his father. And the conversation went something like this. He said through the device, "Hi, Dad." His dad on the internet said, "Hi, son." He said, "How are you?" He said, "I'm fine. How are you?" "I'm fine. Goodbye." So that was the extent of the conversation. And the moment his mom hung up the phone, Dean broke out in tears. He was crying because for him, he had achieved a major life goal. And for us who are parents, you know how special it is to receive a call from a young child, not so much when they're older, but as a young child at work. So I can't even imagine what the emotions his dad was going through at that time. Now, I say this is particularly affirming, as you'll see in the next video, Dean's playing snakes and ladders with his dad at home. So the Hummer not only allows him to communicate, but allows him to interact with devices in his environment.
You want to play a game? Okay. So you can be blue? Alright, I'll be green. Okay, let's go. You're gonna roll the dice? So you can take a look, roll the dice. Ready to roll the dice? Ah. That's a good roll. 3. So we can move your man. 1, 2, 3.
So Dean was controlling the spinner by humming, and it's a particularly affirming story because you probably heard in the background somebody making that noise. That's actually his younger sister. And his younger sister now at home, she doesn't have a disability, she has started to hum to get the attention of her parents. So I say this kind of imitation is incredible affirmation for Dean because she's acknowledging that her brother communicates in a different way, but is a way that is also very effective. The last word I want to share with you is that of audacity, being audacious and bold. And this I credit to my research students. because time and again they have pushed me out of my comfort zone, taking me places I probably wouldn't have gone by myself. And I think the best example of the audacity that they've instilled is in the last 10 years of work that we've spent in the area of brain-computer interfacing. And I don't have a lot of time to share with you the many different interfaces that we've developed, but I'll share two that I think we are particularly proud of. So the first I'm going to show you is an auditory tactile brain-computer interface. So this is for an individual who doesn't have any reliable motor control and also doesn't have vision. So normally this would be an incredibly elusive challenge in terms of trying to find an access pathway. So what our team developed is a system that uses 4 speakers. So 2 of them are in front of you, 2 of them are behind you. And the speakers articulate, in this example, numbers, but they could be letters or word fragments. And to the user, they appear to be showing up at random. And all you have to do is fixate your auditory attention to the message or the letter, the number you want to communicate. And when that is articulated, you're going to be surprised. And what we're going to see in midline, central in the brain, is a P300 response, a surprisal response. And once we've seen the surprisal response, we're able to make a pretty good guess as to which letter you're listening to. So in other words, someone can type simply by focusing auditory attention. Now it turns out the auditory elicited P300 response is much weaker than the visual one. So what my team built was, what they added to the system was a belt. So the individual you'll see in this video is also wearing a belt. And in the belt is embedded 4 piezoelectric motors in the intercardinal directions to align with the motors. So when the speaker articulates, the motor vibrates ever so momentarily. And this auditory tactile stimulus strengthens the surprisal response.
Focus on 4.
2, 4.
3, 1, 3, 4, 2, 1,
2,
1, 4.
3.
You selected 4. Focus on 4.
3, 2, 1, 4, 3.
4, 2, 1, 2.
4, 1.
3. You selected 4. Focus on 1. 1, 4.
2, 4, 2.
1,
3,
4.
2, 1.
You selected 1. Focus on 4.
2, 3.
So it might be hard to tell what's going on there, but the computer was prompting the individual to focus on the number. So this is in the experimental protocol, so we know that they're actually selecting the right number. Another brain interface, the last one I want to tell you about, is using near-infrared spectroscopy. So this is monitoring the blood oxygenation in the brain using light. And it's a non-invasive modality, very easy to set up. And this is one of our very first BCI testers. Simon here has a general hypotonia. He's very weak. He's actually a Hummer user by day, but also very intelligent, a very smart individual. And so what he's actually doing in this video is he's answering a multiple choice question. It's probably too small for you to see, but the question is, which of these do you find in the playground? And there was a slide, a book, and the last one I think was a sandbox. And so what Simon was actually doing was he was doing what's called a categorical verbal fluency task to make a selection. So when the option was highlighted, he would think of objects of a certain category. So you probably saw the cue there, it said video games, because he really likes video games. So when he wanted to select an object, he would just think of video games in his head. And it turns out this categorical fluency task is the left lateralized task, so it preferentially activates the left side of your brain. And using near-infrared spectroscopy, we can easily detect that. And so in this video, he actually made the correct selections. He selected the first and third options and ignored the middle one. And what's important is that to ignore the middle one, he doesn't have to do anything. It's a truly uncontrolled, unconstrained, unprescribed rest, which took us many, many years to achieve, because as we know now through neuroscience, the resting brain is incredibly active with the default mode network kicking in. So I thought those examples illustrated the boldness that our research students have exhibited over the years and taken us to really new frontiers. So just to sum up, we've talked about dreams, how they instill hope. We've talked about people being precious, unique, and irreplaceable, the importance of a sense of mission, the importance of affirmation. our second innocence being childlike and being bold and challenging the status quo. So I want to thank the Kathleen Lau-Murray Foundation and family again for this opportunity and to share our work and for instilling this award. And when you take these words and you took out the first letters and you collect those first letters, something very peculiar happens. One closing comment? Yeah. So for the researchers among us, you know that for this to happen, there's very, very low probability that this happened by chance. So it must be a significant event. I wanted to close with an invitation to everyone in this room to share in a dream that we have, which is that one day in the not too distant future, children of all abilities will be able to fully enjoy the right to communication. That will be the day when parents can rest assured knowing that their sons and daughters will be able to advocate for themselves, will be able to direct their own care. So thank you so much for your attention.
Congratulations, Tom. This is
Thank you.
Wonderful,
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Wow. Next, we have 2 awards to announce, the Best Poster Awards and the McKeith Press Awards. Will the chair of the awards committee, Michelle Cooper-Mink, come up to present the Best Scientific Poster Award. And I also invite Dr. Peter Rosenbaum to come up to give the McKeith Press Promising Career Award.
So all of these awards are being given based on presentations and posters that we've seen here. So the winners may not know that they're receiving these and may not be here, but we'll let you know. So the first award is the Best Demonstration Poster. So the awards committee selected our top picks, and then many of you participated by answering the survey. So it's my pleasure to announce the Best Demonstration Poster Award. Winner is Ann Kawamura, MD, for her poster titled Hip Surveillance in Cerebral Palsy, Developing a Care Pathway at Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital, Toronto, Canada. You here, Ann Kawamura? No. Okay. The next is the Best Scientific Poster Award. This was provided to the Best Scientific Poster. The winner is Heather Roberts, OTR, LPhD, for the Best Scientific Poster titled Augmenting Constraint-Induced Movement Therapy with the Armio Spring Pediatric for Children with Hemiplegic Cerebral Palsy, a comparative study. Heather. Yep.
And Peter Rosenbaum will be representing McKeith Press to present the Promising Career Award that McKeith Press sponsors. Peter.
I've been asked to keep my remarks to half an hour. No, I just want to make a couple of quick comments about McKeith Press. I think you all know, and you certainly should all know, that McKeith Press is the press which publishes both developmental medicine, child neurology, and a vast array of books in our field. The journal is enjoying its highest impact factor ever, and that is not a function of the journal. That is a function of people like the people in this room who submit excellent papers to us, because the impact factor is judged by the quality of the work that is available in the journal. And I want to encourage everybody here who has presented a poster or a paper or is cooking something in their back kitchen to think about the journal when you're thinking about where you want to submit your work. The presentation that I have the opportunity to make is the McKeith Press Career Award, Promising Career Award, and this goes to Vedant Kulkarni. And let's hope that we're successful 1 out of 3. We are.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, okay. You're the person who won it.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Fantastic. Yes, you might as well stay. Well, it turns out that Vedant Kulkarni will be receiving another award. So let me ask the chair of the Communications Committee, Carl Gelfius, to present the 2016 Fred P. Sage Award. We'll get that done and then come back to the Duncan Wyeth Award. So, I'm sorry? I beg your pardon. Carl had to leave, so I have that pleasure. So the SAGE Award is given to the best audiovisual submission presenting clinical research or educational material on DVD, CD-ROM, or a web-based format. The award is named after Fred Sage. He was a past president in 1981, and he was the chairman of the Audiovisual Committee of the AACPDM. Dr. Sage envisioned the great potential of AV use in the academy. He advocated for ways to popularize this method of teaching, and this interest eventually led to the SAGE Award for the best AV submission. I now, unfortunately, Carl won't be here, but perhaps on behalf of him or the entire Communications Committee, the award goes to Vedant Kulkarni. Fantastic, congratulations. I think so. Is there a presentation? Amanda, is there a presentation that goes with this?
There it is.
Excellent.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for this honor, one unexpected one. How do I advance the slides? Is there on this one? The green? Okay, great. I'd like to dedicate this award to my sister, who has cerebral palsy, who has inspired me and many others with her courage in the face of her disability and inspires my everyday work as a pediatric orthopedic surgeon. I'd also like to acknowledge the support and guidance of my not-so-senior partner, Dr. John Davids, who invested in this idea early with his guidance and support, as well as Chris Stover for his technical expertise. I'd like to present to you the HIPSCREEN app, which is a tool to help enable community-based hip surveillance in children with CP. We have no disclosures. Hip dysplasia, as you know from this meeting, is extremely common, with 1 in 3 children having hip displacement over their childhood. And this hip displacement is progressive, with 1 in 5 children with severe CP having a hip dislocation, and up to 50% of these dislocated hips becoming painful over time. This presents a huge burden of disease on the population. Excellent data from Sweden and other countries have shown us that hip dislocations and the salvage surgeries required to treat the pain are preventable with the hip surveillance program. As you can see from this chart, after 20 years of application of a hip surveillance program that identifies hip displacement early and treats it effectively with surgery, hip dislocation can be prevented in the population. So hip surveillance has really been established as the standard of care from excellent studies from Australia, Europe, and really should be considered the standard of care for all of the world. But how do we apply this standard of care to a global context where there is much more fragmentation and disorganization in the medical system, and information is not always freely available? It's estimated by the year 2020 that 90% of the populated globe will have access to high-speed digital cellular service, and that 70% of humanity will have access to smartphones. So it's in that context that we designed this app, which is a freestanding, freely available app. None of us get a cent for this, and there's no advertisement on it. And you can download it for free from HIPSCREEN.org. And I encourage you, on the HIPSCREEN.org website, there's a little tab that says help us with research. We'd love to get your feedback, and if you're interested in participating in research studies, please sign up for that. It's soon to be available for the Android format, and we're in the midst of development. So I'd like to go through with you the details of the app. It has educational material that's embedded in a PDF format, so for easy sharing. That educational material includes frequently asked questions about hip surveillance, how to interpret a hip x-ray properly, how to properly obtain a well-positioned AP pelvis x-ray, which is the standard for measuring hip migration percentage. There's a protocol that can actually be printed out and be given to your local radiology department. In addition, there's information on how to classify children by the gross motor function classification system level. And finally, PDFs of many of the major hip surveillance programs, including Australia, British Columbia, Sweden, as well as the program that we use in Northern California. The second tab on the app is an easy-to-use schedule of hip surveillance that you can choose the child's gross motor function classification system level, and then it will give you the appropriate guidelines. One little disclaimer is that we recently updated the app, and that done button at the top of that first screen, it will be active in the next version, so just look for that next week. Finally, the most innovative part of this tool is the ability to take a picture of an X-ray from any source. It could be a screen, it could be a piece of paper, it could be your traditional X-ray format. And then you can measure the migration percentage directly off of the device. The X-ray that's taken is not stored on the device to allay any fears about privacy. So the traditional migration percentage is considered the cornerstone to early identification. And migration percentage represents the percentage of the ball or the femoral head that is outside of the edge of the socket or the acetabulum. And a migration percentage over 30% is correlated with an increased risk of progressive displacement over time, and is used as the threshold at which children are usually referred to specialty care in most hip surveillance programs. The traditional calculation of migration percentage can be cumbersome, requiring measurements of lines after leveling the pelvis and measurement of distances. Software-assisted calculation of migration percentage eases this, but requires specialized software that's not freely available and can be expensive to obtain. The hip surveillance program has a migration percentage ruler that I'd like to go through with you. First, you select the migration percentage ruler. Then you can take a picture with the device or use a photo existing on the device. And there's also an easy-to-use tutorial that's embedded within that. So let's get started by taking a picture here in this example. So we take a photo of the X-ray. The X-ray can then be expanded using the pan and zoom features, and then it's next rotated to level the pelvis. You can go counterclockwise or clockwise. And the pelvis is leveled using one of these four commonly used landmarks: the triradiate cartilage, ischial tuberosity, acetabular teardrop, or iliac crest. Once that's done, a ruler overlay is applied by pressing the ruler button. And this ruler overlay is divides the screen in half, and we're going to be using the left-hand side for the hip on the left-hand side image. It's expanded until it meets these landmarks on the ruler. The edge of the lateral edge of the femoral head touches the white line. The medial aspect touches the black line. And when that's done, the femoral head is divided into 10% increments by vertical lines separated by, at equal intervals. We then look for the edge of the acetabulum. Here it's between 30 and 40, so the migration percentage is 35%. The ruler can then be used on the opposite hip by simply moving the image using the pan and zoom. I mentioned that 30% is a hip at risk, and so the red box on the ruler simplifies that measurement. If the acetabular edge is outside of the red box, the migration percentage is less than 30%, and this works for either hip. If the acetabular edge is inside the red box, it's more than 30%. So I encourage you to download the app, and please log on to the website and give your feedback. And thank you so much for your attention.
This young man interviewed us for a fellowship spot. We were very disappointed when he picked elsewhere. So he's well deserved both the Promising Career Award and the Fred Peace Age Award, and you can see why. Thank you. Next, it's my pleasure to announce the Duncan Wyeth Award. And I'm going to invite the chair of the Adapted Sports and Recreation Committee, Dr. Erin Conley, to come up to the podium to make that presentation.
Thank you. Each year, the Adaptive Sports and Recreation Committee has the privilege of selecting a recipient for the Duncan Wyeth Award. This award is given to a participant, a coach, a sponsor, of someone who promotes sports and recreation opportunities for individuals with disabilities. This year, the Adaptive Sports and Recreation Committee selected Ronnie Dickson. Ronnie had his leg amputated above the knee at age 17, secondary to complications from Trevor's disease, a rare growth plate disorder that affected his left knee and ankle. Through a series of chance events, Ronnie discovered a passion for adaptive sports, most notably rock climbing, while at school at the University of South Florida. He became an avid rock climber, ran his first 5K, and completed his first triathlon, all as an above-the-knee amputee. Climbing had sparked such a passion and drive in Ronnie's life that he began hosting adaptive climbing clinics to introduce other people with disabilities to this sport, to help them overcome their obstacles. To date, Ronnie has hosted over 50 adaptive climbing clinics across the country, introducing over 1,000 individuals with disabilities to their first climbing experience. Ronnie is currently the chair of the USA Climbing Adaptive Committee, helping promote and grow adaptive climbing, competition climbing, two-time national champion, and has been a part of 4 U.S. teams, taking home the silver medal at the 2014 World Paraclimbing Championships. He is a founding board member of the Adaptive Climbing Group, the largest regional adaptive climbing organization in the country, running weekly programs out of Boston, Chicago, and New York City. He currently lives in Orlando, Florida, where he works as the lower limb and athletics specialist for Prosthetic and Orthotic Associates. There, he treats clients from all across the world at one of the nation's largest private patient care facilities for prosthetics. Please join me in congratulating Ronnie Dickson in his award and thank him for his promotion of adaptive sports.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute honor to be here with everybody. And I just wanted to say a few words. Climbing is something that was ultimately born out of a place of passion for me. At a time in my life where there was a lot going on, just having had my leg amputated and starting my life as an adult. And what I always loved about it was that it was so adaptable at so many different levels and very accessible for both ambulatory and non-ambulatory physical disabilities. And for me, the opportunity to participate in adaptive climbing and offer that experience for other individuals is a win-win situation, because in the short term, you have the ability to boost confidence and allow others to engage in a new experience. And in the long term, you have the ability to improve strength, range of motion, improve motor control, and ultimately what we found in our programs is build really, really strong community relationships at the grassroots level. When I started doing my first clinics in 2008, there were limited resources nationally, and there were not a whole lot of programs across the nation that were available. But now I'm really proud to say that there's programs from San Diego, Atlanta, Chicago, Boston, New York City, and even in smaller regional locales like Knoxville, Tennessee, or Asheville, and even a program has popped up in Nebraska. So I'm really proud of the growth of the movement and having the opportunity to be a part of that with so many other people, because it really has been a group effort between myself and many others to make this sport that we love, sharing so much with other people, happen. And I'm really proud to be here with all of you and share this. So thank you very much.
Next, it's my pleasure to announce the Live Shots photo contest winners. For 2016, this award, by the way, is sponsored by the Weinberg Family Cerebral Palsy Center at Columbia University. I wonder if David Roy is in the audience. Or Joe Dukowski. Well, if they're not here, I'll be happy to present this on their behalf. We're very grateful to the Weinberg Family Cerebral Palsy Center for sponsoring this. If you could have the three winners, please. Number 3, Where There Is No Wheelchair, photographer Manuf Chowdhury. These were voted on by you, the members, on your app. There were over 60 photographs, I believe, and these were the top 3 winners that we then had to adjudicate in the right order. So that was award number 3. Number 2, 2 ballerinas share the moment, photographer Rebecca Leonard. And the first place award went to Cerebral Palsy Is Not Contagious, But My Happiness Is, photographer Tasneem Karim. The winners will all receive an electronic tablet and a professionally mounted version of the photo displayed on site, and you'll receive that later, obviously. Thank you all for submitting your photographs, and we look forward to continuing this tradition on an annual basis. This next part of the program is somewhat celebratory, but also a little sad. This is where I get to thank all the wonderful people who have made this meeting such a success. But before that, there's someone else very important that we have to thank. This person has been a long-standing member of the American Academy of Cerebral Palsy and Developmental Medicine. You will all know who she is. She's served tirelessly as the webmaster for many years, and she is finally retiring from this position, but I suspect will continue to influence that as she hands the baton on. Could I invite Susan Sienko Thomas to come up to be acknowledged for her efforts? Susan. It's a small token of our thanks, Susan. Congratulations. Thank you. Next, I'd like to acknowledge our local host, Esperanza Vargas Posado. Esperanza, are you here? Please. I first met Esperanza with the rest of the team when we were here for the mid-year meeting. She's given us a lot of wonderful advice about the local environment, connecting us with the various stakeholders in the area, including stakeholders in the community forum. Esperanza, thank you for all your support, and here's a little token of our appreciation for you.
I have to thank the Academy for finally coming to South. It has been wonderful. And I congratulate Uni and all the members of the organizing committee for this magnificent meeting. I have been a member of the Academy for a long time, and although I haven't been involved in research, as a clinician, I owe a lot to the Academy. It has given me growth and wonderful ideas, and I have also been able to share, what the Academy does in the world of the children we care for. So thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be your host.
I next want to bring up 3 people who have been behind the scenes and without whose help this meeting would not have happened. Tracy Burr, Jessie Cunningham, and Amanda Sankbell. I cannot thank these 3 enough. I asked Tracy, would it be better if I handed them their gift right here? And she promptly said, no, don't do that. We've got things to do and we don't want to be carrying things around. So they will receive their little gift personally from me when they go back to their offices. Thank you so much. Tracy Burr, Amanda Sankbell, and Jessie Cunningham. Amanda got engaged a week ago. How she managed to pull this off, I don't know, but a special shout out to her because of how wonderful she's been helping the planning team to get this together. One other round of applause. Thank you so much. And the final 2 people I have to thank are the program co-chairs. If you haven't had a chance to say hello to them and thank them, I think you should when you get a chance. Sarah McIntyre and Joshua Hyman, it's been an absolute pleasure to work with you over these